Hey Facebook, it's Jenn here. Today we're talking about our boundaries, living our boundaries. This is part two of a three-part mini training that I have in store for you. And if you haven't seen part one, you can find it just on my profile. It's probably still up there. And if you are watching this sometime in the future in the replay, you can always find all of my trainings on my business page, which is Moved From Within. And if you look at the events, past events, you will find all of the videos complete for all of the training series in the event description for each event. So if you're watching this in the future and you're wondering where parts 1 and parts 3 are and you just happened upon this one, that's where you can find it. So Moved From Within is my business page. I'm just going to share this out, invite some peeps to join us. Just as a little caveat, I am on the laptop today, which means I am on the internet today and living in this wonderful space in Mexico. Sometimes my internet can be a little bit funky. So if you're watching and the video is a little funky, or if you're hearing me loud and clear, just say hey in the comments and let me know how the quality is. And if you're joining in, please say hello. A couple things. This is an interactive training that I like to do for you. Some of my trainings, there's a lot more listening and absorbing, but I do invite you to say hello. Let me know you're there. Let me know how this is landing with you, and let me know if you have any questions. Often the topics that I hit can sometimes hit very tender and sensitive chords, and what I really want you to, and I invite you to do, is to try to kind of move beyond the discomfort, lean into the discomfort a little bit, and if you have a question, really honestly, sincerely ask it. If this is not a safe space for you to ask it, you can always private message me and I can address it in the comments, leaving you anonymous. That's another option. But it is important, some of the questions and themes that come up, because we often feel that we're alone in feeling these feelings of carrying this load. And it is a lot easier when we do share the load. Often the load starts to disappear when it's shared. I'm not talking about offloading your crap on somebody else. I'm actually talking about having safe and sacred space as a witness, which is very, very different than just offloading your stuff. Often we hold our stuff, we hold on to our emotional baggage because we're afraid of harming others and, projecting onto others and offloading. We're talking about boundaries today, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what this looks like. But this can happen, and often we can feel like we're imposing if we share. But what I just want to invite you to do is, in the sacred space, in the therapeutic healing space, sharing and witnessing is not necessarily the same as further attaching to our story. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference, because I am going to talk a little bit about our stories, and I'm going to talk about mindfulness today. I'm going to talk about all the mindfulness practices that we often use to deal with trying to embody our boundaries in a healthy way. So I'm going to talk about all that today, and I'm also going to give you guys a tool. So today's home play is a wonderful tool that I'm in the process of actually creating. You'll be able to download the full version of this eventually as a free download. But what I'm actually going to give you as home play today is a boundaries assessment to be able to. The other aspect we're going to be talking today about is a judgment versus holding ourselves accountable. So accountability and judgment, and what the difference is, because it's really important when we start going into the work of really assessment. So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to give you a piece of the assessment tool that I'm creating for assessing where we're at in terms of our boundaries, so we can start to take action and move forward in healing the spaces that need to be healed. And before I get into all of that. What I invite you to do, again, is share this video out, say hello if you're coming in. I'm just going to share this video out on some technology. I'm going to share this out with my group. And let's see, where are we? So just bear with me now. And again, if you're just coming in, say hey, let me know who you are. Give me some hearts if you're resonating. So I'm just going to, let's see here. So if you are not in my group and if you would like to be a part of that space, Moved by Spirit is the name of the group. So I'm just going to share this live with the group peeps so that they know what's going on. And hello to anyone who is just coming in and joining me. Let me know how the video is transmitting. Let me know if the quality is good, if you're hearing me loud and clear in this sacred transmission this beautiful Friday. I'm just going to invite in some peeps to join us here. And again, if you're just joining me, say hello. Don't be shy. If you have some questions, let me know. If you were watching me yesterday and you did some home play, again, you can watch part one. Part one is in the event for this group. And I will be posting all of the, eventually when I go back and edit these videos, I post all of the, when everything's complete, I post all of the links to all of the other parts. So this is a 3-part series. We are watching part 2. I will be posting the other parts when they're complete all in one. So if you see one of these videos, you should be able to eventually, in the future, you should be able to gather all the links together. And then, of course, if you go to Move to Room Within, that's my business page. And within the event section, if you look at the past events, you'll find all of the videos for any past event. I do many free workshops. I try to do a 3 or 4-part series once a month. So if you really resonate with this topic, I actually did another boundaries workshop, Boundaries One-on-One. Hey, Beatty. I did another workshop in January. So if you want a little bit more boundary stuff, there is some more boundary stuff from the January workshop. Again, all of the past videos and stuff are just inside the description for the event. So if you go into a past event, you can find it. All right. So I think we are going to get started. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about, well, the topic is mindfulness alone is not enough. Yesterday I talked a little bit about what really are our boundaries. And just quite simply defined, boundaries are our clarity with our inner resonance. They are basically healthy boundaries are really being clear about who we are and being safe and comfortable with who we are. So that is a healthy sense of self. We really need to have a healthy sense of self before we can start peeling back the layers that we've developed, you know, what we refer to often as the ego or egos or the masks that we wear to protect ourselves or to deal with interface with culture, relationships, all these different things. These are kind of like what I refer to as the crutches of support. They help support us as we build a healthy sense of self. A lot of people, as we know, just because we grow old does not mean we grow up in terms of developing a very healthy sense of self. And because of that, we often are relying on these different masks and egos and constructs that we create, which I referred to yesterday as kind of our army of protection. We rely on the army because we're not really feeling safe out there in the world. And so where this becomes a problem with boundaries, of course, is that it takes a lot of energy to maintain these structures. And so what happens is, and often these structures can sometimes even come into conflict with our sense of safety socially. And so sometimes we'll drop the boundaries or reinforce. The other problem with these constructs is, just like with emotions, often when we block emotions, when we block anger and fear and all of these kind of what we refer to as negative emotions, or the hard stuff, we also block our really full capacity to receive and feel also the very elated emotions like joy, right? And so they are inexplicably tied together, right? This is why when I talk about things like fear, I talk about the shadow side of fear and the flow state of fear. And the shadow state of fear, of course, is the fears that we bury and that we don't acknowledge, and that kind of often get us stuck. But fear in the flow state is really our sense of intuition and clarity and knowing what to do next. It's our ability to be attentive and really present in the moment in whatever task we're doing. So we get that clarity. And that actually is what most of us are seeking, but we don't often identify it as fear. And so like boundaries are something that we often identify, even we talked about the word yesterday, as like a wall or a fence. It's really not, because if you think about even our energy has a permeable sense to it. So how can you maintain really clearly a distinct wall if we're actually all interconnected? Well, the simple answer to that is we need to be clear. I need to be clear on who I am. And I need to be clear on who I'm not, so that I can differentiate. I can share space. I can share my energy, and I can adjust accordingly. This is what healthy boundaries are. Healthy boundaries are not about building a wall. It's about having the capacity to actually expand your sense of self and contract your sense of self and shape shift your sense of self accordingly in alignment to you, and not in alignment necessarily to other people, in alignment to you and your own harmony. And sometimes what happens is that will shift when we relate to other people, but we always need to be aligned with our inner being. So as I mentioned before, our home play today, I'm going to share with you guys like a little mini part of an assessment of how we can actually start to assess how we're doing. How are we actually with our boundaries? And if you're watching this, sometime in the future, hey Amber, what I really wanted to, I touched on this yesterday, but I especially want to talk about this today, because what the home play is, again, is a kind of a mini assessment on boundaries. And if you are watching this, hello, thanks for joining in. If you're watching this, you're probably thinking my boundaries maybe suck. Let's be honest. A lot of us are attracted to learning more about something that we're kind of feeling a little bit unsure of, stuck of, lacking in. And so what I really wanted to address before we get into the assessment piece is I want to talk about the concept of really holding ourselves accountable versus judgment. Because often what we do is we think that we're holding ourselves accountable, but what we're really doing is judging ourselves. And accountability is really important. This ties into self-talk. And I actually did a whole training on self-love that has a wonderful 3-part home play series that's all about self-talk. So I'm not going to go into it in extreme detail, because there's a whole 3-part, like 3.5 or 4 hours of training on that in the Move From Within page, if you look in the past events. But what I want to talk about, so emphasis in certain situations, yes. So what I want to talk about is how we talk to ourselves, and how the key is this. One of the pieces of magic of why my work is really magical is we are able to go into really sticky and difficult topics that often when we go into difficult, sticky stuff like fear or anger, we have a lot of preconceived notions attached to that came from way far back. It might come from our family lineage, or might come from our ancestry. might come from soul recognition from past lives. It might come from so many different places, of course, society and all this other stuff, our families, right? This is where a lot of our judgments and ideas come from around like the rights and wrongs. And we all have a sense of kind of right or wrong or what's better or worse. If you're someone who follows me, you probably have very high standards for yourself, particularly, you know, when we think about people who are conscious and working to evolve their level of consciousness, we tend to kind of hold ourselves sometimes to unreasonable standards because we're almost feeling, I think, at least in my experience, the sense of like transcending our human nature in a way. And what I want, one of the things, one of the kind of myths that I like to unravel is what really our sense of human nature is, and changing the way we relate to our humanness aspects, because often that is actually the key to opening up a lot of the magical capacity that we have here as a human being in this body, right? A lot of you, if you are really intuitive, you might have a really strong sense of connection to spirit and oneness, which is a really huge energy, and you might feel a little trapped and confined being in the human body. This is something that I experienced personally, which is why I think Abraham Hicks talks about how we should actually perhaps mourn birth and celebrate death, because we're actually kind of like freeing ourselves or liberating ourselves from this like sometimes really challenging earthly experience. Let's face it, right? But what I want to talk about today is, you know, what is the magical capacity of this earthly human experience? Because there is a reason why we have chosen to be here. There is a reason why that we are on the path that we're on. And it isn't inexplicably coming into our bodies and healing our bodies is so much more than the physical aspect of the body. It is also healing the greater body and the Earth Mother. And so we do have this relationship with all and everything around us that is tactile and physical and nature, and we're a part of it. So a lot of our trauma, our cultural trauma, has kind of come from away from our animalism, and it's coming back to, you know, an animalistic or animistic or shamanistic or however, you know, tribal, but in a different way, in a more evolved way. And so this is what we're working with. We're working with revealing the lessons, the true wisdom in the body through different means, through a completely revolutionary perspective. And so this is where I want to start with how we can look through the lens of our being from the intelligence of our being. And so we did a little exercise in the workshop about self-talk. And what I just wanted to invite you, again, that whole exercise, I highly recommend going into that and actually breaking it down. But what I'm going to just give you is the concept. So what's really important to ask yourself is when you are having a conversation with yourself, there's a couple checkpoints you can check into. One is this the type of tone of voice that you would use with a small, sensitive child, or like puppy or kitten, or someone you're trying to soothe from your heart? So is that the tone of voice that you're using? So if it's not, it's probably not coming from your higher self. Our higher self, same thing when I know I am not in the Akashic records. So I do a lot of work with channeling Akashic work, which if you don't know what that is, it's basically just universal energy, which is love, unconditional love. And so it has a tone and a feel of love. And I know that I'm not in the records when the tone and the voice that is coming through me is judgy and not kind and loving. That doesn't mean it's not direct. Sometimes loving can be direct, but it always has the feel and tone of love and softness and support. And it usually helps us feel safe and held. There might be emotions come up. We might cry, we might weep, we might, all of a sudden get a little bit angry or frustrated, but there is a greater field of unconditional love there. So what I'm inviting you to do is the first thing is when you were assessing and when you were doing any of this home play exercises that I ask, even coming back to if you haven't done yesterday's home play around situations where you've been angry. So there was a exercise that was memory-based and a journaling. So if you haven't done that yet, what I really invite you to do, or if you want to go back to it, really sit with and invite yourself. Again, I mentioned be gentle with yourself, but as these things come up, whatever it is that comes up, ask yourself what the tone of voice is. It's really important that we start to get a sense of what is our sense of kindness and self-love and compassion, because that is often what we need to help to blossom and grow and nurture. That voice is deeply connected to developing a healthy sense of boundaries. And this in itself, this practice in itself is a really important fundamental aspect we need to do. It's fundamental. We can't have healthy boundaries unless we start to nurture this voice, not of reason and not of sticking it to us or holding us to it, but the voice of acceptance and unconditional love. And so that's often something we challenge for ourselves, but it's often something that we easily do for others. So what you to do again is just check into the voice. Is this a voice that I would use in a very tender situation with my dearest loved one, my child, an infant? Is this how I would soothe a baby who is crying and doesn't know better, doesn't know why? So treating yourself, because we all have a small child within us that was dishonored in terms of our emotional being, and allowing that. So this is us allowing us to do that for ourselves. And in doing that, what we're doing is actually this capacity and strength within. So this is the first. Again, I'm going to kind of get into the assessment part a little bit later, because the first thing that's really important is we do really need to differentiate the difference between our judgments and the shoulds and the coulds and the woulds. So if you are thinking, this is something I should transmute, this is like an unhelpful thought pattern, I want you to remember this. All of the things that you're trying to transmute, all of the things that you're trying to get rid of and heal are in front of you for a reason. I think what happens is sometimes we have a fear that if we witness this stuff, if we share the story, that the story will just get stronger and more ingrained and we'll attach more to it. Here's the thing. You're already attached to your story. You are. We all are. We're already attached to our self-identity, our ego, our story. It serves a purpose. And what I want you to understand is it serves a really good purpose. Often what happens is the reason why we're having a hard time with detaching from the stories and detaching from these patterns and actually living in healthy boundaries is because we're trying to get rid of something before building what needs to be built. So what's really important, again, is I really want you to focus on what needs to be nurtured, what needs support. How can I support what actually wants to grow? And not worrying so much about our attachments to our stories, to our egos, to our self-identities. Because one of the things that is actually hindering us, and this is why mindfulness can kind of, pardon my French, mind fuck us over, is because what happens is, for example, in classic Buddhism, and this is why it's a little bit tricky, and I talk about this when it comes to Eastern philosophy, and I've studied Eastern philosophy for a long, long time. One of the challenging things, and actually the Dalai Lama himself has talked about this, is in the Eastern world, this healthy sense of self is assumed. It's assumed. It's already granted. And so when we talk about disattaching and unattaching ourselves from the ego and from the story and all of these things, we already have a sense of healthy foundation we're working with. It becomes easier to disconnect from these things. Mindfulness in that case is helpful. But in the West, where we're at is our healthy sense of self is not there. It is not yet there. And so we cannot attach or disconnect from something that is serving as a temporary foundation of support for us. It is simply not possible. It is like trying to build a house without a foundation or any kind of support system. It's not possible. So we first really need to focus on how we actually support ourselves, how we build a healthy foundation of kindness and love and compassion. I talk about how our body is healing the earth, and it's because our body is not a machine, it's an ecosystem. So once we understand how to nurture and be in relationship with our own inner ecosystem, that which we know in our bones starts in the external world. It happens naturally. It happens when you are secure inside. A lot of these tumultuous turmoils of judgments and the struggles that we have with the difficult emotions that basically turn into greed and the raping and pillaging of our resources come from a sense of lack, because deep down inside we don't feel like we're enough. And so there are things that we do externally to try to fix that. However, meditating it away is not helpful either. It's just the other face of the coin. So, the person who is deep immersed in their work and is the workaholic is just as much an addict as the person on the street shooting heroin. We have different addictions, but they stem from the same root problem, which comes from the cultural, societal traumas that we're here to heal. So essentially, in coming into our body, in really feeling secure on all levels of our being. Most of us feel pretty secure in our, especially if you're following me, most of us feel pretty good in our spiritual energy sense of being, right? A lot of the challenge is now harmonizing that with our physical body, because there's a relationship there. But we're so stuck in this dichotomy of mind, body, and then we continue to do the mindfulness work, mindfulness exercise, all in our mind. We're not bringing it back to the language of the body. The language of the body is not the same language of the mind. They're both intelligent, but they need to start to connect. They are already connected. We just need to tap into what it feels like to be connected, what it feels like to be embodied, what it feels like to be whole. It is not something we can understand from only a mind perspective, which is why mindfulness, as I mentioned in the video, mindfulness alone is not enough. We can have awareness, which is what we're going to do in the home play. We can develop an awareness of where we have hiccups in our boundaries. But the important part is how we use that information. Often what happens is we go, okay, I have this story of chronic pain. I have this story of frustration. It's tied with something emotional. I don't know what it is. I feel stuck. I feel this. I feel that. I feel so identified that I can't even see, a potential for the future. Or, perhaps like in my case, I suffered from chronic pain when I was in my 20s. And so for me, it was this dichotomy of like, is this what I'm going to have to live with for the rest of my life? Like, I'm only 20. Like, this is crazy. And so there was part of me that was just like not willing to accept that, thank God, which brought me to where I am now. But, some of my clients are in their 50s, 60s, 70s even, and they're kind of in the place where, do I just accept that this is just like a natural part of aging? And the answer is no, it's not. Pain is not a natural part of the aging process. Your cellular changes. Yes, that's part of the aging process. Your skin will change. Your hormones will change. There is a plentitude of things that will change in your physical body. But that does not mean being decrepit and having a lack of movement and basically deteriorating is a part of the aging process. It's just not. And so this is part of a cultural lie that we live and that we hear and that we believe, and then therefore we practice, essentially. However, for those of us who know deep down in their bones that there is a deeper potential within us and have the courage to really question our own ideas and thoughts around us and have basically the courage to dive into what I call embodiment work, which is the healing of the whole self, we can actually start to tap into a whole intelligence. And in order to do that, we have to move beyond our mind. We have to work with the mind in an embodied mind, not just an out there analyzing things mind. The mind is why also we often get stuck in storytelling, because the mind likes to tell stories. But what we forget is the body holds these stories, and it wants the story to be told in a different way. It wants the story to move through us. But first, we really need to understand what it means to be in our bodies, to embody, in order for the story to come through. This is why I call this series Living Our Boundaries, because in actually practicing the boundaries, we need to embody our being first. We need to be embodied. And what does that mean? What does that mean? So I'm going to actually just leave that as something to contemplate. And if you want to answer that in the comments or in the replay, or sit with that and come back to this video and tell me what your story around embodiment is, what it means to be in your body, have a relationship with your body, what the animal aspects of your body are. These are the things that really we need to heal. This is the time as well now. It's interesting. I do subscribe to what I call evolutionary astrology. I like to look at astrology and the energies kind of like the weather, like it doesn't mean it's going to restrict us to what activities we're going to do outside today. However, it's like the weather. It's just like when I look out on the ocean, sometimes we have huge, beautiful, clean waves. Sometimes it's choppy, sometimes it's windy. Sometimes it's perfectly clean, flat glass. And that doesn't mean we can't enjoy the ocean, even as surfers. Even if it's flat, of course, we can go and out enjoy. However, it's going to shift our relationship to perhaps how we're going to relate that day. And it's the same thing with astrology. It's the same thing with the energies. But what I wanted to invite, the reason why I brought up astrology is Now is the time. We have a bunch of eclipses happening, and we have a lot of energy, universal energy that is supporting us right now in really embodying and transcending some of these concepts and constructs on a more societal level in a really huge way. And the reason why I'm inviting you into this conversation is because if you are in the circle, there is something that you need. I basically, my job is I am an awakener. And I do my own work. My resonance helps awaken others in their own potentiality. I talked about resonance deeply a couple days ago in my video, in a couple videos. So if you want to look at that 3 days ago or two days ago, yeah, I think it was on Wednesday. So check out that. Talked about resonance very deeply there. But essentially, this is actually a really potent time in healing. Because, you know, when I talk about rapid healing, this is because we're working in a new way. We're working in a more evolutionary way, and we're working in a much more efficient way. This embodiment work that is kind of, there's a little bit of an embodiment revolution happening. The thing about this work is when we start to sink and dive into it, we're really healing the whole person, the whole being. We're healing our boundaries, and we're actually helping others to heal theirs simply by doing our own work. Simply by doing your own work. We talk about as healers as like being the beacon or being the lighthouse. It's more than that, actually. It's more than just being a beacon of light. It's actually, like I said, I'm the sparker. So I actually help others ignite the spark within. If I'm doing what I'm meant to do here, my job is not to, you know, I talked about this yesterday when I was explaining a little bit about the program I'm currently feeling, the sacred healing space. So when I was talking about this space as a container, which, by the way, if you are interested in joining, there are 5 beautiful spaces left for 5 amazing and sacred soulful women. I can feel you coming in. Just wanted to send that invite out there. The reason why I talked about this space is because now is the time when we really have a chance to really mute a lot of these shadow aspects, you know, the eclipse, the new moon, a lot of this brings up the shadow self. And in the current astrology, weather and the current universal weather and space, now really is the time for me to help you spark, for me to help you awaken these gifts that you already have within you. Regardless of whatever the way that you express, you might be an author or a writer or an actor or perhaps a mother or whatever you are. People who are healers, who work with animals, who are intuitive, who are empathetic, deeply, deeply empathetic. And so if this is you, we need to create a support system, an inner support system and foundation for ourselves, and also community, so that we can actually create and hold space for others in whatever capacity needs to move forward. This is really what we're here to do. And so, you know, coming back to, I am going to get into boundaries a little bit more, but I really wanted to talk about these concepts because they are so foundational for why we need to really heal some of this stuff. Yesterday, I talked about sacred anger, and I talked about sacred fear and their relationship to our boundaries. And so this is why I'm talking about judgment. This is why I'm talking about really opening up the conversation to have with these difficult topics, being able to witness them and see them in a different light, in a different way, is a much faster and more effective way of letting things go. So this is why we can practice mindfulness. But if you, like me, keep getting the same thing that comes up, and this is what happens, we forget that we don't really have a solid foundation to begin with. And we're trying to let go, we're trying to let go, we're trying to let go. And it works for some stuff because that stuff is not deeply rooted within us. And so we get some sense of, okay, this works, this works, this works. But then often what happens is we get frustrated because the deeper stuff, the roots, are still unresolved. And so the deeper underlying roots of your boundary stuff is actually not about, hey, it's not actually about any of the superficial stuff. You know, often what happens is, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the no's and the yeses tomorrow, but often what happens when we think about not having clear boundaries is we think about being able to say no. And when we can't say no, or when we have a hard time saying no. But it's also about being clear enough in ourselves to know when we need to say yes. How many times have you passed by an opportunity that your heart was aching for, that your soul was speaking to, and you were like, well, now's not the right timing, or I don't have the money right now, or I'm doing other things, or I'm committed to this, or whatever, or, you know, I talked to my partner or my husband, it's just not the right timing for our family, my kids are in school, whatever it is. How many times have you passed opportunities like that and then felt resentful about it? And we carry these resentments with us in our heart until one day we have a snapping moment, and then we don't know why we yelled at that random person in the grocery store. And it's because we've held this stuff down within us. We're not acknowledging when we actually needed to say yes to ourselves. We've been trained that we need to be logical, that we need a reason, that there needs to be some kind of evidence. And so we're training ourselves basically not to listen to our intuition, because again, intuition is tied to healthy representation and processing and understanding of our fears and our angers. And that is tied to how we express a sense of healthy boundaries. We're essentially going out there with, you know, the sword and the shield, but we're really not very strong on the inside. We don't need the sword and the shield if we have a strong sense of inner alignment. That inner alignment. And again, going back to the piece that I was talking about when it comes to really getting in tune to what the voice of your higher self actually sounds like. Because really, again, I want to differentiate judgment versus really being honest and holding ourselves accountable. We can hold ourselves accountable actually with unconditional love and with kindness and support. This is what I offer to my clients because this is very uncommon and untypical. You know, if you think about it, you know, it's funny actually, I had a conversation with a very dear friend of mine about talk therapy, and no offense to talk therapists, but one of the things we were talking about is one of the reasons why we get really, it can be really ineffective or very slow process talk therapy are basically reinforcing a lot of the judgmental patterns and stories in our minds over and over and over again. And then we're not integrating them into the whole of our being, including our body. This is what I refer to as embodiment. And by doing that, we are reinforcing the stuff we don't want to reinforce. look at these stories from the aspect of our inner self and our body, we have the tools to then start to unravel the story, create the new story. I talk about, like, it's like if you study brain science and neuroplasticity, this is essentially what we are. Our stories are neurology. They're physiological neurology, they're emotional, chemical neurology, and they're electrical, energetic neurology that are all aligning together. And so when we're working from all of the different neurologies and really allowing it to like sink in, our body has this magical capacity to start to teach us and unravel some of the neurologies that are happening. It's usually the last to catch up. The body is very fast. And so what we're going to do, again, yesterday, if you haven't watched the video of the home play, again, that's why I wanted you to connect to how your anger feels like. The memory essentially triggers the emotion. The mindful awareness triggers what's happening, and we have the higher self is really tracking the sensations that are going on in the body, and again, without judgment, because when we judge, we shut it down, right? It's like when you have a child that's telling you to finish the story, and it can be a little bit hard sometimes. We need to be patient because sometimes ramble on, just like sometimes I need to ramble on, but at a point, sometimes I need to just get it all out there. Sometimes we need to follow all of the ramblings that are there to fully feel heard, to actually start to release. And it is a reorganization process that magically starts to happen. It's very fast. It's very rapid. And when we actually start to receive and process the information, we truly can unravel it. We truly can let it go. It's not us letting it go. We're no longer doing work and we're no longer efforting. So this is what I want to offer you, because most of us, especially when we're working through mindfulness practice alone, we are efforting and we're not seeing the results we want because the root stuff is still there. So what I wanted to invite you into is, if you want a different process, if you want a different approach that is far more rapid and effective and actually permanent, you know, this is what this space is all about. This is what my healing process is all about. So it is an evolutionary process. It's not a process of revisiting the same thing over and over and over again. So let's get to, after all of that, let's get to the home play. We've got about 10 minutes left. I try not to go too far over in these, although I could talk for like ever about these topics, as you know. Your home play for today. This is a mini assessment. I will write it down in the comments as well. So if you don't, I'll write it down for you. It's a mini assessment of your personal boundaries. And so what I'd like you to do, again, I want you to think back to a time where you feel, or a memory where you felt like you really weren't honoring your boundaries. So this could be a memory of, or it could be a pattern for you. So for example, I had one client that I worked with that had a pattern of, you know, she lives in Mexico. Every time she had a friend or friend or family member who lives abroad or afar would want to come visit, because of course we live in this beautiful resort area next to the ocean. And so she would automatically say yes whenever someone was like, so I'm thinking of coming, can I stay with you? Is that okay? She was like, yes. And then when she talked to her husband, he would be like, hey, actually, that's not okay. I'm not okay with that. You have to go back to your friend and say, no, like, actually, you know, I've got this going on, or this going on, or this going on. So she was really, she would because she would get this feeling of discomfort, she would automatically say yes to the person instead of saying no. And what we worked through was actually breaking it down a little bit of what was actually going on in her physiological process. So what I want you to do, and so this would happen all the time. She would get kind of a feeling of uncomfortable and automatic yes. So what I want to invite you to do in this assessment is I'd like you to think about 3 different times or 3 different opportunities. If you can't think of a particular pattern, maybe for you there's a pattern that comes up. You're like, oh my God, every time this happens, I always do this, or every time this happens, I always do this, and then I regret it. So that's one way boundaries can come up, right? So it can be that. One way where you felt like perhaps you have trampled on your own boundaries, or you let someone trample on your boundaries. Could be a coworker, whatever. So either 3 different situations where you felt that your boundaries, you were not really holding your boundaries properly, that you felt your boundaries were compromised. So remember, 3 different situations. So again, take 10 to 15 minutes. Again, you can take longer if you'd like. Sit down, uninterrupted, quiet. This is super important. This is more than mindfulness work, but we still need some quiet space and some me time. So if the kids are running around, blah, 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 like, wait for a time where you can literally take 15 minutes. If you have to lock yourself in the bathroom, put on the classical music and some candles, do that. But just make sure that you let everyone else in your family or whoever else you're surrounded by with know that you are off limits during this time. Turn your notifications off on your phone, get rid of all the distractions, clear the space, get your piece of paper, your journal, whatever you like to write with, get a pen or pens or colors if you're really visual. Sit down and come to just taking a few deep breaths, centering in yourself. And I really want you to, before you do this exercise, really land in your body. If you need, I do offer a nice little quick grounding exercise that I'm happy to send you. It's a short little recording just to help you get you started. If that's something you're interested in, just send, write in the comments, I want the recording. Or yeah, just write I want the recording in the comments, and I'm happy to send you the link in Messenger. It's just like a Dropbox, very short little recording. Sometimes some people find it's really helpful to just have somebody guide them into a space of being centered and embodied in themselves. So come into your body. And sometimes I also see my clients, this is the other reason why I reach out, because sometimes I see my clients, like a lot of the work that I do one-on-one is through Zoom. And so we have video going, so I can actually see what's going on in their energy, and I can actually feel their energy through my own body. And they're like, yeah, I'm centered. And I'm like, no, you're not. So I actually help to guide them through the process so they can learn to do it themselves. So if you would like to try something different, or if you just want to give it a shot, I'm happy to send it to you. It's free and it's a resource. So let me know. Just write in the comments, I want the grounding exercise, or I want the recording, or something like that. Anyway, so once you come into yourself, give yourself 3 deep breaths. And again, I recommend lengthening the exhale, just using your natural breath, but just lengthening the exhales for about 3 to 5 breaths can often help to get us centered. So once you come into that space, you're going to think about bring in to your consciousness the first. Hello, lovely one. Hi, Heidi. You're going to bring in that first memory or experience that you had. So it could be recent. It could be something that happened a long time ago where you felt really compromised in your boundaries. And I invite you to conjure up a memory, like if you've got like a big, huge, kind of really, really charged traumatic thing, leave that aside. Think about something kind of small. Maybe it was just like an interaction you had with a stranger in the grocery store. So it doesn't have to be this grandiose experience. It can be any experience where you really just felt a little bit compromised in your boundaries, you know, coming into that memory. So what I'd like you to do is just spend a few moments bringing your mind into that situation, running through what happened. And as you start to run through the details, really focus on your body. I want you to really focus into your seat, your connection with gravity, and your hands, your feet, your legs, and your sensation that's going on. So notice if there's a particular place in your body that really calls to you as you conjure up this memory. And what I'd like you to do is try to not get too deep into the details of what happened and what you should have, could have gone. Rather, harness yourself into the witnessing of the sensations that are happening in your body and what is going on. So where are you feeling that in your body? Is there a particular reaction that comes up for you? So again, for example, in the case of this client that I had, she literally had, when she was telling me the story, she literally, her whole body kind of went like this. And I just asked her, do you notice what just happened with your body? She's like, yeah, I just do this tense thing. And so I want you to notice, do you have a sudden reaction in your body? Do you have a sudden impulse to hit something or hit someone or yell or whatever? So just notice what's happening and just feel the experience of it. So feel the experience of that. I just really want you to start to connect that with that. So this is your boundary assessment. And what you're actually assessing is your level of awareness of the physiological response of what boundaries feel like to you. This is really, really important. This is the key piece to start to actually reprogramming and changing what we're actually going to do about it, right? We need to actually have some kind of a tool. Our body is one of the most magical, most rapid, and non-judgmental tools. This is why the mind and mindfulness alone can really get us a little bit in a bit of a tailspin, well, actually a mind spin, because what happens is the language of our body, the beauty of it is our body sensations don't come with judgment. So all of the frustrations that we have about chronic pain, all of the frustrations that we have around, feeling unsupported, all these things that we have where we feel like there's something going on with our bodies, right? Versus, yes, embodiment. So all this stuff that we have, that is related to the psychosomatic. It's related to the mental story. It's related to the emotional processing. The body doesn't have a certain judgment about anything. It's all about just information. So even when it comes to pain information, from the body sense, it's just like, hey, this hurts. This doesn't feel good. It's literally our inner pendulum talking to us. For any of those who are familiar with muscle testing, this is how muscle testing works, right? It's all about, muscle testing is about how your body is responding to a stimulus. And so what you're doing is we're hacking from the inside out. The memory is the stimulus. And what we're doing is we're farming the information that's available there that doesn't come with the whole story. I mean, there's often, a story that's attached to it. There's sort of an unraveling process that comes. But the very first step that I just want you to focus on right now is sensation. Notice. What are you noticing? Just notice that. And if you are a journaler, write it down. You might be surprised of if you do like a lot of intuitive writing, automatic writing, I encourage you to see what flows out from that. Don't force it. You don't have to write anything other than just the pure sensations that's going on. But you might feel or see that there is other stuff that flows through. And if there is, just don't think about it too much, right? Don't overthink. Just write. Allow it to come from the expression of the body. Again, our body doesn't speak a particular language like English, or Spanish or French or whatever. That's our mind's capacity to form words and language. Our body's language is sensation. So what we're doing is we're actually nurturing and growing our capacity here to tap into sensational awareness. And that is a huge and powerful tool that I want to develop with you, that I want you to develop within yourself, because it's a major tool of how we can grow. It's a major tool of how we can actually start to nurture, like I was talking about, boundaries really are nurturing a sense of healthy self-identity and self-worth and worthiness. And in order to do that, we need all of the tools and all hands on deck. So mindfulness is important, right? Mindfulness is the awareness piece, but it's not going to work without the embodiment piece. This is what's missing. For a lot of, almost all of my clients come to me, they're like, I've worked really, really hard. I've been meditating, I've been I've been yoga practicing for 20 years. I've been a practitioner of Eastern philosophy and arts for more than 20 years. And this was the piece that was missing for me. This was the piece that's missing from a lot of the people that I see. This is the piece that often is missing from a lot of clients. A lot of us have what I refer to as like embodiment trauma. We have a hard time being in our bodies. We have a hard time being here. And for good reason, because like I mentioned, kind of like a little bit of a joke earlier on, but it is when we have a really strong sense of being connected to oneness and this universal self, it can feel very restricting. It can feel like, I use the analogy of like, having watched Aladdin recently, huge, great, powerful beings stuffed in this tiny, itty bitty living space, right? So talking about the genie, this is often how we feel. We feel like the genie in the bottle. And so we start to resent the bottle. But we forget that our bottle is not a metal lamp. It's an ecosystem. It's an intelligent and incredible, vital, and magical tool. And it's evolving and transcending. And when we start to actually learn how it works, this is like where we really get to soar in our health and in our lives, because this magical tool helps us to channel and actually transform all the things we want to see, right? So this is the other channel or issue sometimes we have in this space of embodiment is, when it comes to not just our own health and healing our bodies, but when it comes to, a lot of my clients, they come to me for chronic anxiety and chronic pain. And then we start talking about, well, for a long, long time, I've been feeling like I've been in this job and it's not right for me. I feel stuck in my life. A lot of people ask me, are you a healer or are you a life coach? And it's kind of both, because healing your body is a tool for healing your life. When we actually start to use these embodiment tools, we get to use them in all aspects of our lives, because when we start to heal the relationship with the physical, we're also healing our relationship with all of the external things in our lives, including money, including our jobs, including, the partnerships that we create, including our children and the next generational beings that are coming here in the physical form. We're also helping support them to embody and do what they're meant to do. It's a much greater picture when we look at it. And so this embodiment piece is, Amber says, my body has felt to be my biggest limitation. Yes, I totally feel you. Particularly when we suffer from chronic pain, chronic fatigue, or other chronic illness, it can really feel restricting. And in my experience, a lot of these senses of, limitation in our body and restriction in our body really stems from sometimes traumas that we've had with embodiment from preconception or even conception, from beyond really a clear implicit memory of why we feel how we feel. And so one of the wonderful joys about really healing through embodiment work is we can actually, this is why, I work with really heavy stuff, but it's not heavy work at all. It's light. It's joyful. When I finish a one-on-one session with someone, we could have been working through some pretty intense childhood trauma, and we all feel grounded, light, and spacious at the end of a session. If you talk to anyone who I've worked with, any of my clients, there is a true sense of coming home and landing and safety and really joy. Often most of my clients, if they're getting emotional and crying during a session, it's because they've finally reconnected to a joyful place within themselves that they've kind of been keeping hidden for a long, long time. And so when we start to connect to these places of hope and joy and potentiality, it starts to show us the path. It illuminates the possibility beyond the limitations. We do have the physical limitations of our physical flesh, but we forget that our energetic relationship within our whole being is constantly shaping the flesh. So we shaped and grew ourselves. Our own spirit has grown and shaped our being. And so this healing work is tapping into that potency. What we're working with is really big, intense energy, but it's beautiful energy. It's the energy of creation. That's why it can hold space for the yuck, because it doesn't have to feel yucky. Through the lens of unconditional love and creation, it doesn't feel heavy. It feels possible. Just like I like to use surfing a lot as a term, and when it comes to surfing a really big wave, there's a lot of power and energy. And when we're aligned with within our own being, when I'm aligned and attentive and in a flow state of fear, I'm tapping into my intuition and attention, and I'm able to connect and align with that big energy of the wave and ride, rather than just getting smushed and tumbled, right? And so this is the thing that we do, is we're learning how to align with these bigger energies, because we are a bigger energy. We don't need to feel like it's a battle to be in this little tiny living space. This little tiny living space is a much bigger capacity than we really realize. We just have to learn how to be in relationship in a healthy way with that. So again, I'm just going to recap really quickly here, because I am going a little bit longer than I expected. So the home play for today. Oh, hello, Rachel, and hello, Blanca. The home play, just as a little reminder for you today, is, again, I will write it down as well in the comments, because this one has a few little details that I want to make sure that you remember. Again, first things first, quiet space, grounding, coming into yourself. You're going to come into a memory where you felt that you were not really in your healthy boundaries, a feeling of maybe someone trampled your boundaries, or you allowed your boundaries to be trampled. And you're going to come into what sensations arise within your body. So really listening to, and this can be a little tricky. So again, just if you have questions that come up, if you're having a little bit of a challenge with this, ask questions. You're probably not the only one. So what I'd like to invite you to do again is, as you start to go into the story of this memory, pay close attention to where in your body it's landing. And you don't have to get super distracted. It might not be super visual. Or if you're visual, you might receive this information visually. You might see a flower in your chest, or you have a stone or a pit in your stomach. So really pay attention to the essence of the sensation. There's no wrong answer, okay? It's your body. And also remember that no information is also information. If you feel nothing, write that down. that is something, right? Whatever it is you're experiencing. So write that down. Again, an invitation to, if you are an automatic writer, if you are a journaler, if there's other things that flow as you start to write this sensation experience down, just the invitation to allow that to continue to flow. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. So again, if you're not a huge journaler, that's okay. Just the writing down part is very important because it helps us materialize and reflect back what's happening internally, so we can start to receive the information that has been wanting to come through. So that is your home play for today. Again, any questions, comments, or sharing, just write in the comments here. And I mentioned earlier that if you want a little mini grounding centering meditation to practice that's guided before you go into this exercise, I have a free resource for you. So just write in the comments that I want the resource or I want the recording, and I'll send it to you via Messenger. It's just a Dropbox link to a short little recording just to help you get centered and in your body. It makes this exercise a lot easier. That's why it's important to kind of be present, really physically embodied before we kind of go into this memory stuff, because otherwise we can kind of skip over things and miss information. Again, mindfulness is not just the only tool. We need these other aspects to help connect and integrate the pieces together. So that's your home play. Again, as I mentioned, I do have 5 spaces still available for the Sacred Fear Healing Circle. So if you know that this is a space that you need to be in, we are a group of 8 women in total, 8 for the infinity and 8 for the sacred number of really resonating this energy, because this type of support is something that really needs to be amplified in the world. And so I'm inviting people who are ready to start to heal some of this stuff, again, in the energy of lightness, in the energy of real capacity and creation. So this is the energy that we're working with. We're working with creative energy. We're working with really capacity. We're working with intuition. We're working with the flow aspects of these energies that can be really heavy. The support space is deep and it's huge, and it can hold these sometimes really challenging things to work with. So if, again, as I mentioned, and I'm just going to write down the link in the comments here for anyone who's interested in checking this out. So the link to information and registration is just right there in the comments. And again, this is for you. And sorry, I'm just checking my messages. Blanca says, un abrazo, amiga. Benedicciones. Igualmente, te quiero mucho. Amber says, would appreciate the grounding exercise. Definitely will send that to you. And I do have PayPal me. I actually, as a little secret to all of you Canadian people too, I all of my prices are in US dollars, but I have Canadian dollar card for my so if that's something that you're interested in, I can do that. I like to do that because my business kind of runs in US dollars, but I do really love to kind of give my Canadian clients a little bit of like a softer landing pad, because I know sometimes exchange rates can be a little bit crazy and wonky. So just to make it, that makes things simpler for you, I can definitely send you guys that information. So anyway, I did post the link to more information there. And actually, if you want to register, you can register directly on that page as well. It will send you to a PayPal link. And then I will email you within the next couple of days just the first pieces of the program. Again, the official start is on July 21st. So that's actually in 9 days. And there is a one-on-one piece to that, which I'm booking from now until the end of the program. So it's 4 weeks in total if you want to land in that space. So the only other thing that I wanted to say about the Sacred Fear Healing Circle is that really who it's for, and that is really, it's for you if you are in a space where you're ready to really work with this stuff. It's not for you if you are in crisis mode. So again, I really encourage you, if you're in crisis mode, to really seek out some emergency resources. If you don't know what those are, you can always message me. I'm happy to send you some resources, support, and references to how you can start with that. But again, this space is for you if you are in the space where I'm like, okay, now is the time for me to really work through this stuff in a new and different evolutionary way. So that is for you to step into if that's aligned. But again, this is not for like the emergency people. It's also not for the people, I just wanted to be clear, if you are like the fear and the anger and blah, 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 like I want nothing to do with that stuff, this is not for you. Because again, we are in the energy of intuition, creation, capacity, and we will be looking at some of this sticky stuff. So if you're like, that's low vibe, that's okay to be there. However, what we're really doing is transcending this idea of fighting for our boundaries, fighting against the low vibration. They're really like, we need to really heal all of the vibrations. We need to really stop with this whole judgment against the low vibrations. Just because, most of us actually are working on healing the first 3 chakras, which are vibrating at a lower frequency than the upper chakras. But guess what? We need all of our chakras. So we can't just ignore the bottom 3. That's why we're often stuck in where we're stuck at. So again, if this is where you're finally needing, okay, I need to look at these energies. I need to look at these spaces from a different way. And really, it's time for me to start to come in, then this space is for you. So anyway, that is everything that I will say about that. If you have questions, if you look at the page and you have questions, if anything comes up, just ask. I'm happy to have a little conversation around that. So, home play, have fun with it, be gentle with yourselves. Again, remember to draw in the energy of your highest self. That is the voice that's speaking from the voice that you would use for your dearest loved ones. So tapping into your dearest loved one's self as you do these exercises, that is your highest self. That is the space of love and kindness and support. And that will help you to connect to the body spaces. The body likes softness. It likes gentleness. It likes to be caressed, right? We're with sensation here. So, if you think about a little baby, they love to suck on their toes. They love to explore the sensation. They're not necessarily thinking, the bad thoughts about their body and all the judgments and stuff. So coming into that space when we do this exercise can be very helpful. Anyone else who wants the grounding exercise and resource, I will definitely just send me a message, Amber. I will definitely send that to you in a link. And that is a transition for today. So again, we have part 3 is tomorrow, and that's the final part of the 3 series. Again, all of this will be available in the replays in the event. If you want to rewatch things and you don't know where to find them, or if you want to send this to someone else who needs to hear it, or if you just want to come back to it at any time you want. It will always be in the past events in the description. So I will be uploading those videos as they are created. Thank you all for joining me. I really hope that this transmission was of service to you. I really look forward to, again, questions, comments, experiences, things that you get hung up in. Again, I do post this in, it's also being transmitted through the Moved by Spirit group. If you're not in the group, I'm going to post the link to join the group as well in the description of the video a little bit later today, because I don't have that on hand right now. But you can also just join Moved by Spirit. It's also linked to my business page, so if you find my business page, you can usually find the group that way. Ask to join, and we can have, it's a little bit more of a curated conversation there. So if you want a little bit more of a private space to talk about some of this the experiences that you had through the home play, that's a wonderful space. So anyway, this is much longer than I thought it would be, but I am hoping that is of service to you. I'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place. So 10 a.m. Pacific time on Saturday. The normal transmission that I do at 12 on Saturday tomorrow is not going to happen. I'm just doing the 10 a.m. transmission for part 3 of Living Your Boundaries. Sending you so much love. I'm looking forward to hearing from you about how the home play goes. Again, do the home play today. There will be another home play tomorrow. They build on each other. So do the home play from yesterday if you haven't done it already. Then do today's home play and then do tomorrow's. If you don't have time, just do them in order on your own timing. Again, you can always come back to this stuff later. So anyway, so much love to you. Have a wonderful Friday, and I will see you tomorrow at the same time, same place. Mwah!